Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, Director. Good to see you again. I just want to run through a few things, some which strike me as surprising, some are just hypocritical. And I'll ask you some questions at the end, but I did want to deal with a couple of these at the top. The comparison to the Breonna Taylor case struck me as quite surprising. Breonna Taylor was a scenario where no shots were fired at the officers. I think one of the officers actually made a false statement. Breonna Taylor certainly didn't fire any shots at any of the officers. There was the officer who was fired, lied in the affidavit. I think that was found pretty quickly. But in any event, the no-knock issue, I think, is a pretty significant one. And I believe that what's going to happen later today is that there will be a bill offered, the George Floyd Criminal Justice Act, that will help to address one of these issues. So I hear a lot of concern from my Republican colleagues about the no-knock warrant being executed here. I would note that it's pretty routine the way this warrant was executed, but hopefully you all will be willing to support that provision when it's offered today. Mr. Director, did you want to comment on that?
I just wanted to say that I just wanted to repeat again that because this is an ongoing investigation, I'm not commenting. There are numerous different things that I believe that are out there that may not be shown to be the facts when the investigation happens. So I would just hope that we could all agree to wait till the facts come out and assess those facts, because I hear things that may well not even be correct as a factual matter, as things that members are talking about. So that's one of my hopes here today, is just to try and get the facts out.
Well, that's a fair point, but I'll say this. I know that an officer was shot in the execution. I don't have time, I'm sorry. In the execution of the Malinowski warrant. How is that officer doing?
Thank you for asking. My understanding is that he's recovering. I can take a lot, and I understand that, but one thing I want to say is at one point during, people are heated, somebody said something about somebody got shot in the toe. When a police officer or an agent is shot at, it's a serious matter. When a police officer or an agent is actually shot, it's a serious matter. And I know that nobody here would try to minimize an officer being shot as not being a serious matter. I just want to make sure, I understand people are heated. Maybe I got a little heated just now, but that's one thing that I just want to make sure that I know we all agree on that.
I appreciate that. And also the funding issue, which Mr. Neguse addressed, with respect to paying for body cameras. I know it was a very expensive thing when we did it in Prince George's County, and it was one of the barriers to getting it done as quickly as we wanted. But I hope that's another one of those where my Republican colleagues, since you've expressed such strong desire and concern about body cameras not being present here, I hope you'll be willing to step up now and provide the additional funding in the ATF budget so they can move forward with that expeditiously. I also wanted to say this too. We had another debate a few minutes ago about whether firearms are the leading cause of death for children, and the issue, I guess, was, do you count infants or 18 or 19-year-olds or whatever? I just want to reiterate, because that's not the first time we've done that one. And my view then and now is that I think it's a ridiculous point to focus on from the standpoint of whether it's first or second is a leading cause of death. Isn't that enough? I mean, why should we be okay with it? Just, let's say it's the second leading cause of death if you include infants or something. Why would that be okay? Why wouldn't we be concerned and want to try and find ways to bring those numbers down? So, I appreciate the work that you're doing on that front and support the effort. But, we have to find ways to protect our kids from these kinds of gun violence incidents. And with respect to the search warrant affidavit, I wanted to offer that in the record. I ask unanimous consent that be offered.
No objection.
And also the search warrant return, I want to make sure that's in the record too. So it's clear what was, in addition to an officer being shot, which did not happen in the Breonna Taylor case, the weapons that were recovered, but also the other types of conduct that supported the probable cause finding by the judge in that case and supported the entry. And then the last point I wanted to make too, you know, the execution of a search warrant while the people are in the house in the morning, my experience was that was kind of standard operating procedure. It's actually unusual to do it any other way. And the reason for that is it's safer for the officers to try and catch them by surprise, and also leads to better opportunities to seize weapons. So in this case, there were many, many, many. And because they thought there were 150 weapons in the house, certainly security and protection for the officers would be a prime consideration. With that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentlelady from Indiana is recognized.
Thank you. Director Dettlebach, I wanted to follow up on something that Representative Massey was asking you about January 6th pipe bomb investigations. It's over 3 years since it happened. What are you still investigating?
We are not the lead investigative agency. It's the FBI. My understanding is from public really reported there's been over 1,000 interviews conducted. They're investigating the incident.
But it seems like it's like you have a roadmap and FBI not to answer questions. Everyone came here and every question we ask, everything under investigation. It's very clever. You guys brilliant not to answer Congress because everything under investigation. And then when investigation ends, statute of limitation and over, no one gets punished and you continue with this. And this has happened all the time. It seems like your agency should do better than that, investigate something over 3 years. It seems like you should get to some conclusion. But my question is related to these changes under your rule and definition, you know, what is engage in business rule. You know, do you think criminals that want to do something criminal are going to read your 500 pages of definitions? Are they going to read your 500 pages of definition explanations?
I think that, I don't know who will read it, but
Or do you think criminals will be doing that?
I think that it will also encourage, as I said at the beginning, hopefully increase compliance with the law among people who
So you understand that criminals are not going to be reading this, okay? But what is it going to do to law-abiding citizen like Brian Malinowski that potentially was just doing, you know, selling these guns, and I don't know the whole circumstances, but he's dead because he was not probably realizing what you were doing in changes of this rule. So my question is for you is going to be, do you understand how dangerous your definitions have become?
Respectfully, our definitions are based upon the law that Congress passed, and it is based upon our observation and experience in the field.
Interpretation. So let's just go to your definitions. As a normal American, so I understand your definition.
Implementation. It's implementing Congress's law.
Okay, how are you going to implement? I want to understand. I am a gun owner. And I'm going to decide occasionally, say, guys, occasionally I can do maybe 100 times, maybe 5 times. You know what? I am not engaged predominantly a profit. You know, that I don't even have time to do a profit. So at which point, as a regular American citizen, so I understand that you are not going to show up, cut off my electricity, show up to my house, and try to storm the house with a bunch of people that you don't even realize what's going on. So I can be in a situation like a lot of other Americans that not even realize that now you're redefining who the dealer is. So I want to get understanding. Summarize me understanding how I can explain to my constituent what it means now and how I am predominantly earn a profit in this. What is really definition of that?
The statute that Congress passed says that if you're engaged in the business of dealing firearms, quote, predominantly for profit, right, that requires a license. There are some exceptions then that Congress has passed, and respectfully, people may not read the statutes either. They should, though, if they're selling firearms. These aren't possessors. These are people who are reselling firearms repetitively for profit. And I don't think it's too much to ask for somebody who is selling firearms repetitively for profit.
So what is repetitively means? What is occasional repetitively? If I decide, you know, I have lots of guns and I decided to, you know, I want to replace with something else. I have 50 guns I'm going to sell this year. You just decide that I'm for profit. I don't know, maybe they will be for profit. Definitely no one, you know, was going to sell it at a loss, right? And with your rules, probably prices are keep increasing. So like, I'm going to become a dealer now? I have to be registered in that?
Again, I've tried to explain, and I'll
No, I'm
continue
trying to
to.
explain. So what do you
I-
do? What is really going to be now your new definitions? Because it's so broad.
It's not a new definition. It implements Congress's definition. Congress changed the
Yes, and you
definition.
put 500
Congress-
pages of explanation. So can
No,
you
it's a-
summarize
it's
that
a-
normally plain language an American can understand?
I believe that our positions they're not secret. They're in
Yeah, but
court. They're
explain
filed.
without reading 500 pages
rule-
that are
The
confusing.
rule seeks by providing practical conduct-based things that normal people could,
Yeah,
for
so
instance,
please
for
explain.
instance, one of the things that can result in people, depending on all the circumstances, is you take credit cards for payment. That could be one of the signs that somebody's in business. One of the things that
So like,
might
so
be
if
on
I
the
use
other
a little
side.
app and then I
one of
sell
the
a gun and
things-
take a credit card and potentially will be a dealer?
One of the things that might be on the other side is if you're occasionally dealing or gifting to family members, right? We try to say things on
My
both
time had
sides.
expired, but I'll tell you, you put American lives in danger and your ATF life agent in danger by doing this, because you doing gun control. It is a very clever way to make everyone in dealer have a zero tolerance and exercise gun control and Second Amendment rights. But you put your people in danger and American people. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. The gentlelady from Georgia is recognized for unanimous consent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To follow up on the discussions that we've had on the leading causes of death for children that have been spoken about by our colleague from Pennsylvania and also Mr. Ivy, I'd like to ask a unanimous consent to enter into the record an article from April 2022 entitled "Firearms were the leading cause of death in children in 2020." Researchers say also a second one will be unanimous consent to enter into the record an article from October titled "Firearms Now #1 Cause of Death for U.S. Children While Drug Poisoning Enters Top 5."
Without objection.
Thank you.
Gentlelady from Vermont is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Director, for being here. I know it's been a long day. Thank you for your time. So as I sit here, I'm really struck by what I feel we should be talking about here is that we have a fairly simple mandate from the American people, which is to do all we can to stop gun violence. As my colleagues have said, we have this horrible situation in this country, parents, teachers having to see children being killed every day by gun violence. The country is awash in illegal firearms. We've heard that. We have accidental shootings by and of children. We have increasing suicide rates. And of course, mass shootings continue across our nation. And public poll after public poll tells us the same thing. People want us in Congress to do something, to take action. More than half of Americans consistently support stricter gun laws. Listening to some of my colleagues, you'd think that we were on a different planet. The majority is not even approaching or discussing new public protections or stricter gun laws. And the ATF doesn't have the resources to inspect firearms dealers as directed by Congress. Right now, over 2,000 firearms dealers have not undergone any inspection in over 10 years. There are laws already on the books to help us stem the tide of this violence, but they aren't being enforced because oftentimes Republicans won't give them the money to do so. Now, Director, I appreciate very much that you're here today. I'd like to talk a little bit more specifically about the work that ATF does. You got a big job. How does your agency carry out its mission with just over 5,000 employees?
It's very difficult.
It's shockingly low, given
but the
your
way
charge.
look, the way we do it is we have an incredible workforce. I mean, the people the career people, I'm the only political appointee at ATF, not a single Schedule C person, just me. The people who are the career people get the credit here. These are agents, these are investigators, lab technicians, analysts, staff. They do incredible, dangerous work every day. And the only way to make any progress on this is partnership with our state and local partners, which we're better than anybody else with respect to others at. And number two, being smart about how we use the intelligence that we provide to identify the worst of the worst, to make sure that we are actually taking steps to do two things. Number one, identify the worst of the worst, the trigger pullers and the shooters, and get them out of the community, put them where they belong, incarcerated, bluntly. And also, at the same time, to do something to enforce the existing laws to cut off the supply of guns to those same people. It is far too easy for killers, felons, gang members, rapists, domestic violence people to get firearms, even though the law and everybody agrees they shouldn't have them. So you have to do both of those two things. It's a two-part strategy. And there are people who only want me to do one, and there are other people who only want me to do the other one. And the fact of the matter is, you're not going to make progress unless you have a reasonable approach on both.
So to follow up on that, how do you go about making those decisions about priorities? And are there functions that you unfortunately have to deprioritize due to the resource constraints that you have? And what are those?
So you make the decisions based on data, as best the data that you can find in real time. It's not always perfect. And there are areas of this country where I wish that we would have more agents. The New York City is an example. So in New York City Police Department is 36,000 strong. I have about 30 people in New York City. It is absolutely, and we punch way above our weight. And that's the case everywhere. So we are making decisions about where the crime threat is. When I make an investment on the southwest border, as we have, not I, we have at ATF, that means at ATF that we can't start up a whole new division. That means we're pulling agents from some other place that we really care about. So we are constantly struggling to balance resources in the best way we can to face a lot of threats.
And Director, I'm just about out of time, but I think it's clear that without substantial funding, we are not going to improve our statistics on gun violence, and we're not going to improve our public safety outcomes. We should be putting the money to work to help protect our kids. I say that as a member of Congress. I also say that as a former teacher and I'm a parent of 2 teenagers. We have to do something about this and not just talk about it. Thank you.
Gentlelady
I
yields
yield
back.
back.
Gentleman from North Dakota is recognized.
We're conflating two issues here. A man is dead and an officer was shot, not because of rank and file law enforcement doing their job, but because somebody made a leadership decision in order to execute a warrant in the most dangerous way possible, given the circumstances of that case. And we could sell 6 a.m. and standard operating procedure. You can do that everywhere else. I've represented 3 officers and officers involved shootings. I spent 10 years dealing with search warrants. I know the facts of this case. I know where the guy worked. I know that he was surveilled. And I know that they chose to implement a warrant in a way that absolutely maximized the risk of harm, both to the person being served the warrant on and to the officers serving the warrant. But I'm going to move on. I'm going to move on to something else quick. Federal gun charges are what we call strict liability crimes, right? If you have a gun and you're a prohibited person, that's the crime. There doesn't need to be intent. There doesn't need to be any of those things, right?
Disagree.
So if you're a felon in possession of a firearm, you can say, I didn't know I was a felon.
No, but there's an intent requirement in Congress's statute. You can read 922G1. It's in the statute, Congressman.
You said earlier that ATF's responsibility is to implement the laws that Congress passes, right?
Correct.
When did the U.S. House pass a rule classifying a pistol brace as a short-barreled rifle?
That rulemaking is based upon the
When
National
did Congress
Firearms
pass a law? When did
1934.
Congress pass a law? They didn't.
In 1934, Congress passed the National Firearms Act, which said that short-barreled rifles were unusually dangerous.
I'm not
Congress's
asking
words.
you about I'm not asking you about short-barreled rifles. I know what short-barreled rifles are qualified as in the National Firearms Act. When did Congress pass a law saying pistol brace is qualified? When did Congress pass that law?
Congress passed, they are
didn't.
covered by
When
the
did the
National.
Senate pass the law? They
They
didn't. When did the president sign the law? He didn't. The first pistol brace was sold in 2012. A guy walked into a gun store, bought it legally, walked out of the gun store with the pistol brace rifle. No need for $200, no need for a stamp.
So you're saying if there's a new brand of gun that didn't exist in 1968, that the Gun Control Act doesn't apply to it?
I'm saying in 2012, a guy in Dickinson, North Dakota walked into a firearms store and bought a gun legally, correct? with a pistol brace. Didn't need to do a stamp, didn't need to do a $200, didn't need to do a $200 registration.
Again, we look at, I think.
No, this is a factual question. The first pistol brace was sold in 2012. Did the person who purchased it need a stamp, and did he need the federal government's permission to buy that gun? That's 2012. That's
The
not a hard
2000,
question.
respectfully, the 2012, the thing that has been talked about in this committee previously was never brought to market.
Okay, so 2015.
It would depend upon the actual design of the individual item. There were numerous different items being manufactured.
You
It
spent
changed
20
over
years
time.
as a prosecutor, 20 years as a prosecutor. You know the answers to these questions. I'm done asking them. I'm just going to go with numbers. From 2012 until 2023, the ATF estimates that there are 3 to 7 million pistol braces sold on the civilian market, not requiring the $200 stamp from the NFA for a short-barreled rifle. Now, what Congressional Research Service says there are 10 to 40 million of those things purchased in the same period of time. Manufacturer sales estimate are significantly higher than the ATF's estimate to include, and those estimates exclude 2020, 2021, and 2022. Now, the deputy chief of the ATF has stated that prior to June 1, 2023, 255,162 registrations on retroactive purchases were received by the ATF. Does that sound accurate?
I don't know who that person, they're going to have a title like that, but the number sounds like the number of people that during a certain period of time sought registration. The number does sound familiar, but I don't know the quote that you're
So
talking.
if I got a rancher in Southwest North Dakota who's hunting snow geese to a federal wildlife refuge, and a U.S. agent comes out, he purchased that rifle legally in 2015, and he's out shooting geese with a shotgun. U.S. Fish and Wildlife comes to his car and sees a gun in there with a pistol brace. What's the penalty for him now? He bought the gun legally, 2015.
Well, again,
It's 5 to 10 years and a max of $250,000 fine. You talk about costs, you talk about budget cuts. So let's just assume the low end number of the ATF numbers on 3 to 7 million. 3 million guns that were purchased legally without any extra requirement. The ATF has gotten 255,000 of those registered. So you are roughly saying 2.7 million people are now felons in possession of firearms for something they purchased legally.
I respectfully disagree with a lot of the characterizations in your question. The last administration, Attorney General Barr issued guidance on this before ATF even got to this. People were on notice for years and years and years that you can't take something and break it into two and then put it together and treat it differently than the person who buys it in one piece.
They bought a gun legally and you guys retroactively made it illegal in a different qualification.
Respectfully, I
That's exactly what
disagree.
happened.
That is not what the facts reflect.
Time of the gentleman has expired. The gentlelady from Missouri is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I want to start by offering my condolences to Ms. Malinowski, who I believe was here earlier. St. Louis and I are here today seeking accountability for the gun violence epidemic in our country and for all instances of potential law enforcement misconduct. Director Dettlebach, thank you for being here today. Let me say that I support several of the ATF's recent efforts, including the Ghost Guns rule, the stabilizing brace rule, and the efforts to stop gun trafficking. But as gun violence continues to shatter families and communities, thanks in part to weak gun laws in Republican-controlled states like mine in Missouri, equitable and effective enforcement of our existing laws, it must be a top priority. There is a difference between the way the law is written and the way it is enforced, as communities like St. Louis know all too well. So taking on the gun violence epidemic requires asking hard questions about enforcement. That's why the last time you were before this committee, I asked you about the Good Old Boys Roundup. In the 1980s and 1990s, ATF agents organized shameful whites-only events, which former ATF Director John McGaugh characterized as being racist in nature, anti-Black, and having discrimination almost every year. It may seem like old history, but there are legitimate and recent concerns about racial bias in the agency's enforcement operations, specifically in its use of sting operations. For example, a USA Today investigation from 2014 found that 91% of people arrested in ATF sting operations were Black or Latino, When you were U.S. Attorney, your office prosecuted these kinds of cases. Are you aware of these concerns regarding sting operations? And if any, what steps have you taken to address?
At ATF, we are very clear that we don't look at any of those kinds of factors. And it is absolutely a necessity, Congressman, that law enforcement not look at these kind of factors. And I would say there were comments that were made earlier that I thought somebody was perhaps implying that because somebody's wealthy or lives in a nice neighborhood, that they should be treated differently than other people. And I know there are lots of people who are in communities where they economically struggle, who are law-abiding citizens. We don't assume that because of where you live or how much you make, that you're any more or less likely to be a law-abiding citizen. That is a core value at ATF. And it's very important for you to ask that question and very important for me to answer it.
Thank you. And I will say that sometimes looking at it, we get to what you just said, though, looking at it and seeing that we do understand that folks in marginalized communities are often over-criminalized or criminalized, period, is an issue that we must also address and fight to. I think you kind of started to allude to that. And so thank you. These questions are essential because in order for the ATF to be effective today, it needs to fix the problems of yesterday, including its troubled history of racist behavior and enforcement. But my concern about enforcement does not extend only to questions of racism. There needs to be accountability for all instances of potential misconduct by ATF agents. And that's why I do support my Republican colleagues' efforts to get more information from federal and local law enforcement about the death of Brian Malinowski. I know there is evidence that Mr. Malinowski fired first on the agents, but the circumstances warrant more information about what happened that day. But I say this because my solidarity, I want to be clear, my solidarity and my pursuit for accountability, my pursuit of accountability are not conditional. But I will say that I have been surprised to hear my Republican colleagues expressing concern about law enforcement shooting, lack of body camera footage, and no-knock warrants. I'm surprised because I and many of my Democratic colleagues have pushed for law enforcement accountability for years, and Republicans have mocked us and fought against us at every step. I'm surprised because 2023 set another record for law enforcement killings in this country. Police have killed an average of 3 people per day. Police disproportionately kill Black people, and there have only been 9 days this year where police didn't kill someone. Yet Republicans have refused to hold hearings about any of those deaths. And my question is, where have you been? Where have you been? Trayvon Martin, Mike Brown, we've been protesting for 10 years. We have been protesting. We've been shot with rubber bullets. We've had dogs unleashed. We have been hit with tear gas and rubber bullets. George Floyd, we were out there for 3 months. Mike Brown, we were out there for 400 days. Where were you? Why didn't you care then? Because they're Black? I don't understand. All of a sudden now we want to talk. But see, the thing is this. When we took a knee, folks were mad and criticized us. When we were nonviolent, people still criticized us. But now all of a sudden it's because now the difference is it color? But I say this, my solidarity is not conditional. So I ask them for the record that their solidarity is not conditional, that they are willing to support oversight and accountability for all deaths by law enforcement officers, regardless of race, ethnicity, faith, location, or anything else, that they will vote for real policy solutions that prevent police brutality and fund programs that keep our communities safe, including gun violence. And yes, I went over because someone else went over too. I just want to hear that come from my Republican colleagues.
The time of the gentlelady.
We care about police brutality that affects every person.
Thank you. The time of the gentlelady has expired. The gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Director, as you may know, I'm the co-lead alongside with Congressman Stanton of Arizona on the bill that's exempting certain less than lethal projectile devices from the Gun Control Act definition of a firearm, tasers. ATF provided some comments on an earlier draft of the bill, noting some concerns with the legislation. I'm sure you're aware of the bill. Does ATF still have the same concerns that we had on the earlier version?
I don't know. Look, Congressman, can I get back to you on that? I don't want to answer precipitously. I know this is an important issue for a lot of people, including some in law enforcement have expressed views on it. So can we get back to you on that? Because I don't know whether any changes in the bill have affected anything.
Okay, so then let me just bear with me then. I'll explain some of the arguments. Hopefully, as the director, your understanding of the Gun Control Act will be strong enough to provide some context. But the proposed definition of less than lethal device would be unworkable in the field, I think, is the issue.
Yeah.
Because officers and agents cannot measure the projectile velocity,
velocity.
during field stops and searches and
As
seizures.
opposed to in centrally, but you're talking about out in the field, I understand. Yes.
So, I mean, ATF doesn't currently test any of the firearm velocity in the field on any of the search and seizure stuff. Is that true? Is that right or not?
To the best of my knowledge, that is correct. It's always hard because some of our operations aren't in Washington. We have operations that are not field operations, but are centralized in other places. So I want to be careful. But we have, I think you're right as a general matter, yes. I'll check though and get back to you. If
And there's
that's not correct, I'll get back to you.
Okay. So to be clear, ATF right now, though, the concerns that this change would be unworkable in the field hinges on the idea that officers and agents would suddenly need to start measuring velocity and checking the internal workings, right? I mean, what I'm trying to get to the bottom, because I think Congress is way beyond ATF on this. I think there's a bipartisan group that certainly is starting to grow when it comes to this technology. And ATF still seems stuck in where we were 3, 4, 5 years ago.
Okay, I understand.
agree with that,
We will get,
I mean, obviously, you're getting the same feedback that we are, because this is law enforcement wants more.
there are exceptions in the current law for law enforcement, but I understand your concern and we will get back to you, Congressman. I will commit to you that we will get back to you.
Okay, very good, very good. So with the time that I have left, I just also wanted to submit for the record a letter from Mr. Earl Griffith, who served in the ATF for more than 20 years, retiring as a division chief of ATF's Firearm and Ammunition Technology Division. Mr. Griffith's letter, dated March 6, 2024, is in support of the bill, HR 3269, and suggests that ATF already has the existing authority to revisit classification determinations if the manufacturer decides to modify a less lethal projectile device into a lethal configuration. And that's what the manufacturers are doing. I mean, they're changing the technology to kind of match up with where ATF is at. And I think that's unnecessary. I think this thing could be cleaned up if we would just have somebody pay attention to kind of where Congress is moving on this and how quickly we're moving.
Congressman, my understanding is that the statutory language that is at issue in a lot of these is to expel a projectile by means of an explosion. And that is what is causing some of these classifications. Now, Mr. Griffith obviously is a well-respected, longtime ATF employee. We'll look at the letter and try to get back to your office on where things stand.
Yeah, I'm just telling you, Congress is way ahead of where ATF is on this. And that's why I wish you would take a deeper kind of longer look at kind of where we're at. Because otherwise, the input that you would have is simply not going to be taken seriously if the statute is written or if the changes are already made. So I would encourage you to do that. I yield back.
Gentleman yield? 30 seconds. Does the gentleman yield? Yeah, thank you. I just, real quick, you mentioned earlier that we need to be focused on the facts, particularly relative to the Malinowski case. I just want to make clear, understand, are you disputing that the ATF was not in Little Rock, Arkansas, ready to execute a raid on the week before, on March 12th, 2024?
I'm neither disputing.
We
nor
saw the video.
singling out
We saw the video, right?
There's a lot of again, this is a slippery slope. I have to abide by our Department of Justice
You're saying
policy.
ATF wasn't in Little Rock the
No,
week before?
I'm not saying any of that. I'm saying that
Okay.
until the investigation is completed, I am not disputing that fact or any other fact. I'm trying to counsel because I
All
hear
I'm saying
a
is
lot
you-
of
you
things
said earlier
flying out
things were-
there.
You said earlier, things were stated that were not facts.
That
I think
wasn't
I've stuck to
focusing-
the facts.
I wasn't focusing
wanted to
on
just double
that.
check.
There's been a lot of things said, Congressman,
Gentleman from
Mr.
Virginia,
Chairman, I'm sorry.
Gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
The death of Brian Malinowski is a tragedy, but unfortunately, it is not a surprise given the cavalier attitude of the ATF over the years and the way that they play fast and loose with the law and with the facts. And with the lives of American citizens. I want to ask you about the latest area in which the ATF is playing fast and loose and really taking actions that are going to endanger more lives in the future if we don't see changes. And that's the new attempt to have a universal registration check rule. As you know, the Gun Control Act makes it unlawful for any person, save a licensed dealer, to engage in the business of dealing in firearms until he's filed an application with ATF and received a license. The 86 Act modified the GCA, adding a statutory definition of engaging in the business. And then in 2022, Biden signed into law the BCA, which broadened the definition by eliminating principal objective and replacing it with a requirement to predominantly earn a profit. But I want to ask you, because people who make occasional sales, exchanges, or purchases of firearms for the enhancement of a personal collection or for a hobby, or who sells all or part of his personal collection of firearms, that portion of FOPA altered by the 22 Act?
So
Was the exclusion altered?
that language
by
is
the 22
in
Act?
that language, I believe. I mean, this is in litigation, our position, and the rule speaks for itself. But I believe you will find in black and white in the rule, that language that you just said, that in black and white in the rule, that
Remains.
language is there.
Yes, that language remains, that exclusion remains unaltered by the BSCA. So these people who make occasional sales, exchanges, or personal purchases of firearms for the enhancement of a personal collection or for a hobby, or who sell all or part of their personal collection of firearms, are exempt from this 22 Act modification. And yet, what we see,
For those activities.
right, for those activities. All right, well, let's
They're
talk
doing
about
a
whether
whole bunch of
personal
other
collection-
things.
All right, do you believe that a personal collection of firearms can be for self-defense?
So I think, again, the provisions of the rule speak for itself. And in this format, it's hard to get into a deep debate on this. We also have filed significant legal papers in courts that are hearing this. And because it's pending litigation, nothing I say can or should contradict any of those things. The rule sets forth conduct-based factors, which under the totality of circumstances, right, could give rise to somebody being engaged in the business or not.
I'm
And it
glad you
gives
said-
examples. It gives
I'm glad you
examples
said
on-
conduct, because where did Congress make it a crime to merely intend to earn a profit off of selling a privately owned firearm? Because that's what you're
Well,
attempting
there's
to.
there clearly is an intent element of this statute that
But
Congress
solely
wrote.
intent? There's
There's-
no action?
Again, as in many criminal statutes and many statutes that are regulatory, there is both an act and an intent. Sometimes those things differ from statute and regulation to other statutes and regulations. The text of the law and the text of the rule are
Didn't change.
always what controls.
Didn't change, and so your efforts to become mind readers over at ATF and somehow determine intent based on no activity whatsoever on the part of a gun owner to earn a profit
Well, Congressman,
is playing fast and loose with the statute yet again.
Congressman, not even talking about this statute, but in many, many, many regulatory functions and many administrative proceedings, many civil proceedings, people's intent is part of the determination that
Or,
finders of fact make. They look at their words. They look at various different things that they're doing, and they can infer intent. I think the standard jury instruction in many cases talks about these things.
Well, I just want to know when Congress authorized ATF to require Americans who offer to sell even one firearm to another family member to get a federal license, submit fingerprints, maintain government registration paperwork, register as a business, and keep regular business hours open for ATF inspections.
Congressman,
They never did that.
let me be clear. This is not, the rule cannot and is not and does not create a universal background check. We could not do that. Only Congress could do that. And I want to be very clear here that the rule does not do that.
I get what you're doing. ATF is playing too cute by half. The American people see it, we see it, and we're not going to allow you to do that. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentlelady from Wyoming is recognized.
A December 2021 ATF memo alerted the American people that the ATF was maintaining a digital, searchable, centralized registry of guns and gun owners in violation of various federal prohibitions and contrary to what you testified to under oath today. In response, Representative Michael Cloud and 52 House members sent the ATF a letter dated November 22nd, 2021. ATF responded to that letter stating that it had 920,664,765 records, 865,787 and 86,000 of which are in a digitalized format, which Gun Owners of America has proved to be searchable. This was discovered shortly after ATF was revealed to have processed over 54 million records in a single year. What is the latest record count for ATF's illegal digital searchable National Gun Registry?
0. We don't have, we obey the law. We
According
do
to your
not,
letter,
none of our
according to
records.
your letter, you have over 865 millions of these records are in digitalized format. You have admitted it.
Respectfully, I think ATF is the only customer of Adobe Acrobat that
Well, let's
pays
get
money to
into that.
remove search function.
Before the
to rem-
Commerce, Justice, Science Subcommittee of the Appropriations Committee in April of last year, you testified that ATF pays Adobe Acrobat Extra to have certain search functionality eliminated.
That's not correct.
Well, is ATF's digital database of gun owner records capable of being opened by normal Adobe Acrobat and searched by name?
Again, we
It's
pay.
a
we
yes or
pay-
no question. Is it?
We pay to have search function eliminated. We don't pay Adobe Acrobat, I believe. We
If
pay somebody
ATF
else, but
If ATF asked, could Adobe Acrobat re-enable name search functionality on ATF's illegal gun registry?
it is not an illegal registry. We do not
If
search
ATF
by, we do not
asked-
search by, we do not search in the method that you're suggesting. And we cannot. And these are records that we pay a public safety cost, which Congress is,
If
Congress to
ATF
balance for this
asked-
decision.
If
which is
ATF
in-
asked, could Adobe Acrobat re-enable name search functionality on ATF's illegal gun registry?
I'm not an expert in Adobe Acrobat coding. I do know that we do not keep a gun registry. I also
You have
know that the,
records- You have admitted that you have over 920 million records, over 865 million of which are in digitalized format, correct?
the question, if your answer is, are they somehow scanned in so that we literally don't have to have 950 million pieces of paper? That is a lot different from what you're implying with respect to having a gun registry. It is also true, Congressman, that we don't have any records of firearms purchases
Let me ask
for
this
people
question.
who are still in business, which is the vast majority of currently
you
sold
also-
firearms. We have 0.
You also testified before that subcommittee that ATF's digital database of gun and gun owners is not capable of being searched by personal identifier. Can ATF's gun registry be searched by make, model, and serial number, enough searchability to create a list of, say, all AR-15 owners?
The answer to your question is we do not use, search,
not
get
answering my
around the
question.
registry.
You're not answering my question.
Your question respectfully, it was a technical question with 5 or 6 different parts.
Can
I'm
the
trying not
registry
to
be
erroneously, as you said, I'm under oath, I'm trying not to erroneously misstate things of technical nature. We do not keep a registry. We use these things for pending homicide investigations. It takes us a lot longer to find the name of the killer.
Mr. Dettlebach, you have mentioned gun running and gun violence associated with Mexican cartels and the crime associated with that. In fact, you refer to the cartels as, quote, the most dangerous organizations in the world. How many conversations have you had with President Biden or Secretary Mayorkas demanding that they close the southern border?
We do not, ATF does not.
How many discussions have you had with President Biden or Mayorkas about closing the southern border?
The answer to your question is,
0.
we work with DHS
How many
on
conversations have you
border-related.
had with them demanding that they close the southern border?
Again.
It's a simple question.
Again, may I answer?
How many conversations have you had
We
demanding?
discuss our border-related security issues with DHS frequently. I have had
Have you
conversations
demanded
with
that they
Secretary
close the
Mayorkas
southern
about our
border?
efforts.
Have you
to try and-
demanded that they close the southern border?
I'm at ATF. It is not our jurisdiction to police the southern border. That's for DHS, Congresswoman.
You don't care about crime in this country if you're not trying to address what's going on at the southern border.
Respectfully, I deeply disagree. I think it's very unfair.
Gentleladies, time has expired. The gentleman from South Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Chairman. Director, here's what I find troubling. In 2021, there were 5 FFL licenses that were revoked, but in 2023, that number has jumped to 157, I believe. That's a dramatic increase, in my opinion, and I think we've echoed this on this side, a very stark indicator of the Biden administration's aggressive overreach against FFLs. And here's what's worse. An increasing number of firearms dealers faced with severe and often disproportionate consequences for minor clerical errors have elected to shut down their operations rather than endure the extensive and costly process of defending their practice. This is like David versus Goliath, except that Goliath, the US government, wins because all the resources are there and you have a small business trying to defend themselves against the insurmountable resources of a federal government. So let's take a look at the number of voluntary business closures post-inspection over the last couple of years. In 2021, there were 24. 2022, 69, and 2023, there were 80. This is a result of ATF's zero tolerance policy and, quite frankly, a very concerning trajectory of ATF. This is all occurring under the guise of public safety, but ATF is essentially working to dismantle a very lawful firearm industry. Let me ask you something, and this was talked about earlier. Where can I find authorization from Congress that you would revoke somebody's FFL for a minor clerical error? Where is that in the statute?
The statute and the policy and our implementation deals with willful violations. And by the way, it limits them further to violations that endanger public safety. The vast majority, one thing I think we agree on, which I want to say because it's important, the vast majority of firearms licensees out there are following the law and following the rules.
Correct.
They're law-abiding businesses. That's why over 98, almost 99% of our inspections do not result in revocation. There's due process. People can request a hearing. In the hearings, Congressman, that we conduct, these are administrative hearings at ATF. Half the time, we decide not to revoke because of something that the FFL presents to us. People have lawyers at some of those. They don't have lawyers at others. And in many cases, we work with FFLs to try and cure any defects, if they're clerical defects, to make the FFL stronger in terms of a target for people who, not the FFL is doing something illegal, but others are taking advantage of just
Director, here's my concern, and I know we've got limited time, and I'm
sorry.
certainly respectful of yours. The BSCA was passed in 2022. Based on that, you have, there's been a slight modification to the rule that, quote, even a single transaction or offer to engage in a transaction when combined with other evidence may be sufficient to require a license as an FFL. And so you are inferring from that, and again, I think this is where the minor clerical errors come in. Congress has made no law to this. There is a 2022 amendment, but I think you have largely ignored another statute, 18 U.S.C. 921A21. Are you familiar with that statute?
Yeah, I'm familiar with all the code, but I
What does that say,
respond.
Director, what does that say? What does that statute say?
I believe it's a provision you're talking about for importers, which is a provision that you're referring to.
It says that the term engaged in business
Okay, so the
shall
engagement.
not include a person that makes occasional sales, exchanges, or
Right.
purchases of firearms for the enhancement of a personal collection or a hobby, or who sells all or part of their personal collection or firearms.
That's quoted in the rule.
Correct. The concern that I have, though, is that that's not the application by ATF, that you're taking a very heavy-handed approach. And again, you have to look at the disproportionality of this, is that you have the heavy hand of government, you have the enforcement, you're creating these rules, I think, which are beyond the scope of what Congress has implied or directed, and you are using this to kind of target people. And again, I'm not talking about the bad actors, I'm talking about lawful businesses who are trying to do the right thing and have minor clerical errors. Let me ask you something real quick. I want to shift gears. Could you describe Spartan? What is Spartan?
Spartan is the name of the general case management system that exists at ATF. It replaced an older system. The system had been in service for many, many years. It was no longer supported, I think, anymore by the technology out there, so we replaced it with the new case management system.
So ATF administrative investigators are tasked with determining whether an FFL willfully did anything. And according to a recent ATF revocation hearing, whether, quote, in preparing the report of violations is the issue of willfulness even a factor, end quote, the ATF director responded, I input data and Spartan does the figuring. So are we allowing AI to determine whether or not something is willful?
I'm
or
so
not?
glad you're at, absolutely not.
So these are
We,
humans that make these
people,
determinations.
human beings review all of these things at supervisory levels. You cannot revoke somebody
Time
without
time of the gentleman.
several levels of approval.
Time of the gentleman has expired. Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Texas recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're almost done, sir. Thank you for being here for a second time. Thank you for your time. Really appreciate it. Basic question, sir. You're an attorney, correct? It's my understanding.
Yes, I am, sir.
So I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt, knowing that you understand the Constitution, including our Bill of Rights, correct?
I hope so, sir.
So what is your interpretation of our Second Amendment? Do you think that Americans have the right to bear arms? Yes or no? And just give me your brief overall view of it.
Yes, and I think what we do is we look to what the Supreme Court has decided on this. The Supreme Court, Congressman, has been very clear on this. The law is, the Second Amendment jurisprudence is lengthy and changing, but as a lawyer, I don't get to decide that. The courts decide it, and the courts have said yes is the answer to your question.
Okay, so we have these Second Amendment rights because we know how important it is for us to maintain our constitutional republic and a functioning republic because, again, as a gun owner myself, as a lawful gun owner myself, it's very important to me to be able to protect my home and also prevent tyrannical governments from infringing on our rights as human beings bestowed to us in our Constitution. So it's my humble opinion, sir, that the ATF is certainly infringing on a lot of these rules for law-abiding citizens and infringing on our Second Amendment rights for law-abiding citizens. I'm not talking about trying to catch the bad guys that have guns. I am talking about implementing a level of pain on people like me that, quite frankly, was not bestowed to us via the Second Amendment. Unfortunately, as bureaucrats attempting to infringe on the Second Amendment rights, that some lawmakers in Congress, they see gun owner tragedies as an opportunity to slowly chip away at these rights. So recently, lawmakers used a heartbreaking Uvalde tragedy as an opportunity to pass red flag legislation. This is a fact. I remember a time when we were told that red flag laws were simply a conspiracy theory. I'm old enough to remember that. And they are not a conspiracy theory anymore, sir. Red flag laws are in bills and they are in Biden's executive orders. If you don't know what red flags are, in short, red flag laws are a type of pre-crime enforcement where courts grant orders allowing for the seizure of firearms from someone who hasn't committed an actual crime. When I think of red flag laws, I see the Safer Communities Act, which President Biden signed into law in 2022. The Safer Communities Act included $750 million in funding for states to implement and improve red flag laws. Again, that's going after the good guys, not the bad guys. But it had to stop there. It has not stopped there, sir. Biden in 2023 announced an executive order on gun control with the goal of, quote, increasing the effective use of red flag laws. Biden also opened the Office of Gun Violence Prevention, led by Kamala Harris, which has further encouraged and entrenched red flag laws across the nation. These are all facts. I'm still waiting for her to tell us what the root causes are of the border crisis, and you're going to try to tell me that Kamala Harris is going to tell us the root causes of gun violence. Good luck with that. Finally, the ATF has expanded upon the Safer Communities Act by issuing a new ruling that in practice will implement universal background checks. I'm going to say quiet part out loud because we're almost done. Whenever a gun tragedy occurs in this country, we always hear the left say, we have to do something. We have to do more. And then once legislation is passed, my colleagues on the left then say, we have to always do more and more and more and more. I'm going to warn the American people that we have to do more. What we have to do more really, really means. First, they come after AR-15s. Then they come after your sporting rifles. Then they come after your long guns. And then when homicides have not decreased because you take away all of those weapons, and keep in mind the AR-15 is responsible for 6% of homicides in this country, they're going to come after your handguns and disarm our country and disarm our rights and take away our Second Amendment rights that have been given to us by our founding fathers. And rather than take away guns from law-abiding citizens, instead, we should be going after criminals. specifically criminals. The reason why I'm talking about red flag laws is because the American public understands that we're going to start having mission creep here. You go after one thing, you go after another thing, then there's always more. There's always going to be a fight. We're using tragedies to infringe on rights that have been given to us by our Second Amendment. And as you, being the head of the ATF, I need you to be cognizant and very aware of that. Because most of the people in Texas that are ranch owners, AR-15 owners like myself, combat veterans like myself, we don't need more laws. We need to implement the laws that we have on the books and go after the bad guys that have guns, not the good guys. And that's your job. Thank you so much for being here, sir. And I yield back the rest of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Director, thank you for being here. I apologize. We got to run to votes, and so we're going to sprint out of here. We appreciate you being here for 3.5 hours.
Thank you.
And answering our question. That concludes today's hearing. Without objection, all members will have 5 legislative days to submit additional written questions for the witness, or additional materials for the record. Without objection, the hearing is adjourned.
Thank you.
I didn't pay the bill. You know, I get a lot of heat. I got a teleprompter that's gone. This one's almost gone, but we've been there before. Supposing that happened to Biden, you know what happens? He'd go like this. Bye. He'd leave. I'll stay here with you for an hour. We'll have some fun. But I want to thank Tom, and he's been an amazing guy, actually. We've gotten to know each other mostly over the last year, and his wife is even more amazing. She's so great. She's been with me, and she convinced him to be with me, and now he's more with me than her, and it's a very complex relationship. And no, they're two great people, and thank you very much. Thank you, Tom. Great job. Very respected in Washington. But I want to just start off by saying hello, Minnesota. This is a great state. We're going to win this state. 1952. Can you imagine? I thought we won it in 2016. I thought we won it I know we won it in 2020. We got to be careful. We got to watch those votes. You know, we don't need the votes. We got to watch the votes. That's the big danger. Stop the steal. You know, there's a lot of different names we have for it, but all of them are pretty accurate. I'm thrilled to be back in the Twin Cities with the hardworking patriots from the heartland of America. This is really the heartland. And I'm here tonight to declare that we're officially expanding this is an official expansion, Tom, of the electoral map. We're going to put this because this is so in place. Did you see? 2 polls came out. One had me 1 point behind. One had me 2 points up. And another one's coming out tomorrow. And the word is that I'm 2 points up. I don't know if that's good or bad. How are you 2 points up to Biden? He can't talk. He can't walk. Can't find his way off a stage. Can't put 2 sentences together. Although he has agreed to debate. So I don't know. Maybe they know something. He's going to be so jacked up for those debates. You watch. I want to thank Minnesota GOP Chair David Hand for the incredible job that you do. David, thank you. A really good man. David, are we going to win? What do you think? You're an important guy. He may be the most important guy in the room, Tom. I'm sorry. You know, if he, whatever it takes, you know, whatever it takes. But thank you. And thank you to you, your beautiful wife. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And we're really counting on you to do the job. Because we'll give you the ammunition. And I think you will do it based on everything we're seeing. A very good friend of mine, one of the great governors of the country, Doug Burgum, as you know, from North Dakota. Thank you, Doug. The best hockey player in the history of Congress. There's no question about it. Pete Stauber, my friend. A congresswoman who's a patriot and a real fighter, and she's always been with me right from the beginning. Michelle Fischbach. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you very much. And the greatest purchaser of advertising in the history of the country. There's never been, I don't know, his pillows are excellent, but I'm more impressed with the purchasing. If he could buy my ads, you'd never, for what I spend, you would never have any empty spot without a Trump ad. This guy's the greatest buyer of ads in history, Mike Lindell. And his beautiful, just married, beautiful new wife. Thank you very much for being with us. That's great. It's a beautiful couple. I've said that a lot before, but this time I know it's perfect. I've said so many times, what a beautiful couple. 2 weeks later, how you doing? Well, we broke up. That one's never breaking up. But Mike, it is true though. He had a commercial. You know, you call up like the networks, you call up Fox. They do a 30-second commercial. A minute is very hard to buy. This guy has commercials that last 10 minutes. They never stop. And now he sells pillows and he sells sneakers. He sells anything. And we love him. He's a special guy. He's gone to, how many rallies have you come to? This, over 100, yeah. No, it's amazing. He's our friend. And he does it out of love, and we love him. With the help of everyone here tonight, we're going to take back the White House, and we are going to make America great again. We're going to do it. Two days ago, it was announced that inflation in April continued to rage at a brutal 3.4 annual rate. Nobody can believe it because they're just not stopping it. That's above the probably 30 points that you've picked up over the last couple of years. This is a level that people have not seen before. Consumer prices just hit an all-time high. And since crooked Joe Biden, and he is crooked, he's the worst president in the history of the country. How we can be 1 point down or 2 points up in Minnesota to this guy, I don't know. There's only one way it can happen. They cheat. That's the only way. That's the only way. Some people like it, some people don't, but that's the way it is. Sorry to tell you. And I never use the word folks. You know why? That's all he uses. Do you ever watch? Folks, folks, folks. It's a nervous habit. I did a play-by-play of his State of the Union address. Man, was he jacked. But he used the word folks like 40 times, folks. So I used to use it. I used to, nice, 1 or 2 times in a speech. But groceries are up 22%, eggs are up 50%, electricity is up 40, 50, 60%, gasoline is up 56%. Car insurance, you can't even get it. I mean, it's up 52% if it's available. And then if you need it, they don't give it to you. They fight you like hell. And meanwhile, real wages are down by almost 5%. This is what we have. This is Bidenomics. He thought it was such a good term. They had to explain, no, it's a disaster. No, inflation has eaten, it's a country buster. And we have inflation like we haven't seen in, I guess, 78 years, but I think it's probably longer than that. That's why this November, the people of Minnesota are going to tell crooked Joe Biden, right? The apprentice, you're fired. Get out of here. Get out. You did a lousy job. Worst president in history. You did a terrible job, crooked Joe. His inflation catastrophe is, in effect, a colossal tax on American families. We will call it the Biden inflation tax. This is a tax that you don't know about, Tom. I just came up with it. Like, it's the biggest tax in history. It's called an inflation tax. It's about 50%. This is like going to Congress and raising your hand for a 50% tax. That's what it is. when I left office, and we had virtually no inflation. We had nothing. We had only success. Yet in the past 3 years, it's an amazing thing. Yet in the past 3 years, the taxes cost us an average. If you think the average Minnesota family is a staggering $28,000. Think of that. Who could think of that? $28,000 in tax. And the Biden price hikes are continuing to drain $1,165 from the typical Minnesota family budget every single month. I mean, think of these numbers. These numbers are staggering. And, you know, if somebody got a little bit of a wage increase, it doesn't matter because the prices have gone up so much. It's a sad thing. Now they want to go to an EV. Everybody has to have an electric car. Is that wonderful? They don't go far. By the way, that ends on the first day. First day. And if you want to buy it, you can buy one. You know, I'm not knocking it. If you want to go, 3-4 miles and then back home, plug it in, get ready for the purchase of a newspaper the next day. You want to go down buy a newspaper like in the old days every once in a while. But no, we're going to end it right away, immediately. And I think people, if they want to buy an electric car, I think it's great. But they have to be able to buy gasoline powered. They have to be able to buy hybrids. The hybrids are good, the hybrids are good. But the electric, they don't go far. They're very expensive, and they're all going to be made in China. And now they want to make electric trucks, and the trucks are a disaster because the battery is so big, it takes up half of your payload. To go to California, you need 6 stops, and you have no chargers. Other than that, it's very good. If you go with like an 18-wheeler, you can go from New York to California without a stop. And it's something I never even heard before. So one of the truckers told me this. They're begging for help because they're going to be put out of business. They're all going to be put out of business. He said, with a big truck you buy at Gorgeous, I won't even use the names, but you know the names of these companies, and you have this massive tank with diesel fuel. And as it goes along, it gets better and better because you're burning fuel and it gets lighter and lighter. With a battery, it just stays the same weight. You just got to lift that battery. But they're too big. The batteries are too big. They don't work. It's not something that's even feasible. But these people don't want to hear about it. They don't want to talk about it. In 3 minutes, a sane person, if they were in government, could be talked out of going all electric trucks because the batteries are so big and so heavy, they take up half of your payload. And in 3 minutes, but they don't want to hear about it. You say you have to stop 6 times instead of no times. They say, we don't care. I mean, who could say that? These are radical lunatics that we're dealing with. They're lunatics. And now they want to go all electric army tanks. Okay, you believe? So that when we go in and blast the crap out of an enemy that we have and that we hate, and sometimes, we should be there. Many times we shouldn't be there, to be honest with you, but we blast the hell out of an enemy. We do it in an environmentally friendly way. What are we doing? And now it turns out, we make the best tanks in the world. And now it turns out that in terms of army tanks, you have to put a truck on the back of the army tank because the battery is so big. It's going to have to tow a truck, and it still doesn't go far, and it still costs twice as much, and it's not effective. But it does keep a clean environment, which is very important because I know up in a place called Minnesota, they like clean air. And you know what? You had the cleanest air in history for 4 years using natural gas. Trump, natural gas and clean coal. Unbelievably. That's true. It's true. It's true. The whole thing. And, all this stuff has to be made in China because that's what they have. We have a thing called gasoline. We have more liquid gold under our feet than any nation in the world, including Russia and including Saudi Arabia. I did Anwar in Alaska, the biggest find in the world. It's probably the size of Saudi Arabia. And in his first week in office, they ended it. Ronald Reagan tried to get it. He couldn't get it. Everybody tried to get it. I got it approved. They were getting ready, and this guy ended it in the first day in office. So sad. I mean, it's so sad. And ultimately, that's what caused inflation. Your energy prices went up so much, and very simple. Whether you make donuts or whether you make tires or whether you make anything, you have to turn on the furnaces and you have to get the trucks moving and all of the other things. And the energy is what caused this massive inflation that we've suffered through. And then everything caught on. I mean, you ever see bacon where it went up 4 times over a course of 3 years? So I don't eat bacon anymore. It's too expensive. But unbelievably, crooked Joe Biden went on television last week and he proclaimed in an interview with Americans that he's saying that Americans can actually afford his brutal inflation tax. He said they can afford it. He declared that families, quote, have the money to spend. They have the money to spend. They don't have the money to spend. They've run out of money. I mean, they're on literally, people don't have, if they get sick, if they're away for 2 or 3 days of income, I don't know, what do they do? You know, you're spoiled. You're a lot of rich, very rich people. You know, you set all sorts of records tonight. Have you heard that? You set attendance record and you set a money-raising record. But can you imagine if you miss a couple of days of work, can you imagine you can't pay your bills? I mean, we have the highest percentage of that we've ever had. And Biden blamed his economic disaster on companies shrinking the size of their sticker bars, okay? Can you believe that? But you know, it's a funny thing. I don't know if you can see it out there. Does anybody have good eyes out there? Because this is, okay, so I just got this today. Somebody handed it to me. So weird, and not as a joke. I said, anybody have any Tic Tacs? And the guy said, yeah, I have one. Look at the size of that sucker. Can you see that, Pete? This is called Biden Tic Tacs. Can you see it, Tom? This costs more money than the one that was like 10 times bigger. This is inflation. That's a perfect, the guy actually handed me, do you have any Tic Tacs? Yeah, here, take mine, sir. I said, what the hell is that? I'm never going to lose this. This is going to be a part of our. Terrible. But Americans are not struggling. You know, this is the worst platform. Who put this stage up here? This is the worst. The frickin' place is falling down. I notice it keeps tilting further left. Like too many other things. What a crappy contractor this was. No, it's true. You know, I'm known as being a pretty tough negotiator, and sometimes I get a bad rep. A contractor does a bad job. I met a lot of great contractors there, but he does a bad job, I don't pay him. And then they say, Trump doesn't pay us. I pay my bills. I pay the bills so fast if they're good. But this happens to be, look, the teleprompter is useless. It fell down. I don't know why it fell down. It's not like, I don't mind. I've lost teleprompters to wind. There's no wind in here. So why the hell did it fall down? Did you see it? It fell down. I'm standing here listening to the great Lee Greenwood, and the teleprompter falls off the stage. Now I put my hand on this thing and the thing tilts over. This is not, I think it was Emmer. Maybe Emmer doesn't like me. No, this sucker is really tenuous, I'm telling you. This, at some point, I won't leave and we'll finish up, but this sucker is going to be sitting down there on the floor. I've never had this before. I've never had a podium that's falling down. I've had teleprompters. You know, I was in Ohio. In fact, our great senator from North Dakota, you were there for somebody that's going to win, I think, Bernie Moreno. And we had 45 mile-an-hour winds. We had 28,000 people. By the way, in New Jersey last weekend, we had 107,000 people. That's a poll, right? That's a poll. But we were in there to help Bernie Moreno get elected, Senate, running for the Senate. He's doing well. And we had 45 mile-an-hour winds. And we had 2 teleprompters that were going like this. And then one broke and fell. I was waiting for that to happen. And I'm supposed to be speaking like for an hour and a half. And I'm saying, we're all by ourselves up here. We got no teleprompter at the stage, but at least we had winds. Here we don't have anything and it's falling apart. This is what happens in America when you don't do things right. And we don't like that, do we, huh? We don't like that. We don't like that. But Americans are not struggling to make ends meet because they're buying too many Snicker bars. We don't talk about that. They're struggling because we have the worst, most incompetent, most corrupt president in the history of our country without question. One of the most vicious effects of the Biden inflation tax is how Crooked Joe has made it impossible for millions of Americans, especially young Americans, to buy a home, a car, or even make their rent. You know, young Americans are getting out of high school and getting out of college, and it's a disaster for them. They've never had anything like it. They've never had anything like it. High inflation means that high prices, high interest rates, high mortgage rates, and death for the American dream. It really is. It's death. You know, we talk about death, and a lot of farmers here. We have farmers that I took great care of. We got them $28 billion from China. Can you imagine? Do you think Biden thinks about getting you money from China? He thinks about giving them money, but we have $28 billion we got you, but we also got rid of the estate tax on your farms and small businesses. Because a lot of people, you know, they love their family. They love their family and they want to. Now, if you don't love your family, then you shouldn't leave it to them. And is there anybody in the room that doesn't love their family? Because I actually have 3 or 4 people usually when we do, they raise their hand. In which case, this tax doesn't help you much. But we gave you, we got rid of the death tax or the inheritance tax on small farms and businesses. And that's a big thing. But remember this, it's all going back. If Biden gets elected, how the hell do you elect this guy? Who would elect this guy he's destroyed our country? He's destroyed our country. You know, I have great respect for the office of the president, for the presidency, and I would never speak about him that badly. But then they did something that is unthinkable. They took a president that got 75 million votes, more votes than any president in the history of our country, sitting president. No sitting president even come close to that. And they indicted him for nothing. And you see what's happening, all falling apart. It was a nothing. And then they indicted him again. Then we had Fannie Wade, you know, I call her Fannie Wade, took the surname of her great lawyer boyfriend. We hired him because of his expertise. He never did it before. They paid him almost $1 million. They traveled all over the world. Didn't they take 9 trips, Tom? I don't think you. What was the last time you took 9 trips? He didn't take 9 trips in his entire tenure as a politician in this state. I guarantee, and your wife wouldn't let you. She wants you to work hard. But they took 9 trips in like 8 months. In other words, they were taking trips. And then they said, oh, well, he's being paid. So think of this. So he's getting almost $1 million. And he's taking her for these lovely cruises, Norwegian cruise lines. Oh, that's beautiful. These people are just beautiful. And they're going on Norwegian, and they're going all over different trips to Alaska, to Europe, all over the place. She wants to indict me for like mobster stuff, okay, mobster stuff, when I didn't do anything wrong. You know, today, if you say, I don't believe the election results are correct, they want to indict you because they don't like talking about it, because you're coming too close to home. But we talk about it, and we're proud to talk about it. And if you're chilled, you're going to have very dishonest elections. And the biggest risk we have here is exactly that, because we have plenty of votes here. We're going to win. But the biggest fear and the biggest, because so many people say, will it happen again? Will it? And we have great people, but these people were born to cheat. You know, they're born to cheat. They have no shame. But think of it, Fani, it's F-A-N-I, but they pronounce it Fani. How do you, if you had the name F-A-N-I, it's called Fanny, right? How do you get Fani? I think when she became the DA, she gave it a little Frenchy stuff, you know? Fani Wade. It's Fani Willis. We call her Fani Wade because the boyfriend, she's so in love with him. And here's the beauty, though. I think about her. So you guys have all seen this whole deal. So she said, no, we took trips. Yes, we took trips. And then she realized that, well, she paid for the trip because she paid him, you know, all this, almost $1 million, probably more than that. And they used that money to pay. So then she said, no, I didn't pay for, I paid cash. That's right. I paid cash. Now she's got a real problem, because now they're saying, where'd she get the cash? But they don't go after the Democrats. They only go after the Republicans. Think of it. She said she paid cash. She didn't pay cash, and she would have. But if she paid cash, she has a bigger problem. Right now, she has a real problem. Where'd she get the cash? But they leave her alone. She's now running for office, and they leave her alone. These are corrupt people. These are bad people, very bad people. We have deranged Jack Smith in New York. He's a deranged individual, Washington, and he has destroyed a lot of lives over the years, and always seems to get overturned because he goes too far. He's a deranged individual. And now you find out that in Florida, he tampered with the evidence. You saw that, right? He tampered with the evidence. He got his hand caught in the cookie jar. You know the expression? But this is what we have. And they're using, they've weaponized Biden. They've weaponized, they call it lawfare. And I call it warfare because we have to fight these people strong. If you're a congressman, a great one, like Michelle or Pete, and you get a subpoena one day, you're out of business. You're out. You might as well just a subpoena. Pete gets a subpoena. He doesn't want to hear about it. Michelle gets a subpoena. That's what they do. They've used this as a weapon. This is cheating on election, no different than they did 4 years ago. This is cheating on elections. Today I saw in Washington, D.C., there's a lockbox. Looks nice, except there's a problem. The door is open on the bottom, the big door. It's totally open. They're taking pictures of it. This is a whole big scam. They have lock boxes all over the place. It's a whole big scam, hundreds of millions of dollars going in. And that's what we have to be careful of because we have all the votes we need. We have you don't have that problem in North Dakota like we have. But I tell you what, we have all the votes we need. And I'm counting on the chairman and Tom and everybody to make sure that just give us an honest count. We're going to turn the state for the first time since 1952. But it's true. I never talk this way because, I used to treat Biden with a little respect, not a lot, but a little, more than he deserves. And talk about he didn't do a good job. But now I say he's the worst president. He's incompetent. He's not a smart person. He has no idea. He can't find the stairs to a stage. See all the stairs we have? We got more stairs here. They're all over the place. How the hell do you not find them? You can walk in any direction, and yet you ever watch him? He goes like this. And then and so far he's doing good because there's a stair over there, but then he walks into a wall and stuff. Thank God for the Secret Service. They usually run off, take them. This is what we're running against. How the hell do they get 50% of the vote? They start off with a big advantage. Remember that. They start off with a big advantage. They start off with, certain votes that they get almost automatically. But we're going to be getting a lot of those votes this time. I think we're actually going to be getting a lot of those union votes that they typically get. I think we're going to get a lot of the union votes. United Auto Workers, they're fed up with United Auto Workers in terms of their leadership, and I think we're getting that. I think we're getting a lot of Teamsters voting for us. We're doing polls. We're like at 82%. And tough to get the top guys, but I think we're going to get some top guys very soon. So I think we're really eating into them. African Americans, Hispanic Americans, we're getting numbers like nobody's ever seen before. So we have to put it away. We have to be careful. Guard the vote. I call it guard the vote. Mr. Chairman, we have to guard the vote. And we have to make sure that vote is counted and they don't add ballots and all of the other things that they do. They'll do anything. They have no shame. On day one, we will throw out Bidenomics and we will reinstate Maganomics. We're going to have Maganomics. We're going to make it the most successful. We will be again the most successful country in the world. We'll stop the Biden stupid spending spree. We'll end his inflation death spiral. This is a death spiral. We'll terminate his Green New Scam. You know what the Green New Scam is, right? And we're going to drill, baby, drill like we've never drilled before. And we're going to bring down energy prices. And you have very high energy prices here. And you know what I did for you up north, nobody's ever done what I did for you. And they ended it immediately, right? Didn't they end it immediately? It's like they came in and they just ended it for no reason. They don't even know why they ended it. It was perfect what we did. And I get so many thanks. I remember when I did it, I was here, and miners and people were coming up to me, and they had tears in their eyes. Thank you, sir, for giving us our livelihood back. And then they ended it, like in the first couple of days of the administration, along with many other things, like the Keystone Pipeline and lots of other things that should have never been ended. But just as I did before, I will rescue Minnesota and I'm going to rescue Minnesota from all of the ravages you've made. And we're going to rescue the Iron Range again. We're going to rescue the Iron Range. Before I took office, the Obama-Biden administration had wiped out the Iron Range, every job. It was gone. 7 plants were idled and 2,000 workers were laid off immediately, and then it got worse and worse. But after And I came up here and I met some people and they just told me, it took me about I figure a minute and a half to figure it out. And I opened it up like nobody's ever opened it up and it was doing great. And then these people came in, they closed it. I don't know, they closed it. Nobody knows why. They said the environment, it's not the environment. But after I imposed powerful tariffs on foreign steel, the Iron Range came roaring back to life. I put big tariffs because China was dumping massive amounts of steel in our country and killing all of our steel companies. The people that like me the most actually are the steel guys. They like me. They say, thank you. You saved our businesses. But now they're sort of siphoning it off, and it's not a pretty picture. I tell you, these people, what they're doing to this country between the border, where millions of people are coming in. I mean, think of it. Millions and millions of people are coming into our country from mental institutions and from jails, prisons. They're coming in, they're pouring in. We have terrorists coming in. We're going to do a massive deportation, but we have no choice. It's not like we have a choice. And we start with the criminals. Hundreds of thousands of criminals are coming into our country, hundreds of thousands. Iron ore shipments out of the port of Duluth soared by nearly 50% under the Trump administration. I rescinded the federal withdrawal in Superior, Superior National Forest. Did anybody ever hear of Superior National Forest? Good. Well, I opened it up. What's wrong with that? They close it. They say, we don't want it. I don't know these people. I think they just want to make your lives miserable and destroy our country. It's so crazy. I mean, seriously, like, why would they want an open border? Why do they want high interest rates? Why do they want to quadruple your taxes, which is what is going to happen? All those things we talked about, I mean, it's going to happen. Why do they want to have men playing in women's sports? They want men. You got to look at the weightlifting records. A record that stood for 18 years. Oh, 18 years it stood. It was solid. They just couldn't break it. Those beautiful, powerful, extremely strong women. There weren't too many men could lift but these are men, but extremely strong women. And they were looking and they put a quarter of an ounce, think of that, a quarter of an ounce there, a quarter of an ounce there on the barbell. And they get up and they lift that sucker. They're going to do it. Mom's in the first row, right where you are, beautiful woman. And she's so proud of her daughter. My daughter's going to lift that. Mom, I'm ready. I've been working 10 years for this. I'm ready. Olympic tryouts, right? Then she gets it up. Mom, I don't know, Mom. This is a heavy sucker. Oh, Mom, I can't do it. Boom. Can't do it. Couldn't do it. Just that little extra they couldn't do. This guy who transitioned, he transitioned. Thank you very much. He comes in. Have you lifted before? No, not much. He goes, how much is it? 218? Oh, I should be able to do that. He walks up to the. They put 30 more pounds on. Well, I mean, what did he break it by? Like hundreds of pounds, Tom. And then you allow this to happen in Congress? The worst is the swimming. How about the swimming? Right? How about the swimming records? These are records that women won't be breaking maybe in about 400 years if everything goes well. But with the kind of idiots we have running this country, not a lot of people will be left because the power of weaponry today is very scary. We could very well end up in the next 5 months in a World War III because we have incompetent people. He's an incompetent person. Joe Biden is incompetent. And let me just tell you, I would have never said, and that's a strong statement to say the president is, he's grossly incompetent. Everything he's done. Look at Afghanistan, the way they left. I was leaving Afghanistan. We're going to leave with dignity and strength and our equipment, and we're going to stay in Bagram. And we were taking the soldiers out last, right? Last. You don't take them out first. We took them out first, and then they were free to have, they had a free-for-all. But we're going to keep Bagram, the big air base. You know who has Bagram right now? It's only 1 hour away from where China makes its nuclear weapons. You know who has it now? China has it now. The guy is just a horrible thing. So when he did that, I said, now the gloves are off. I can say anything I want. Think of it. Alphonse Capone, the great has anyone ever heard of Al Capone? Scarface, has anyone? This was not a nice person. Even Doug would have a hard time living with him. You would say, let's get the hell out of here. This guy's dangerous. No, if he didn't like you for dinner, he would kill you. You would never be found, let's put it this way. Do you have any wetlands around or swamps? Because he liked wetlands, you know, I just dumped him in the wetlands. But Al Capone was indicted less than me. I was indicted over a short period of time, 4 times. My whole life, I never even heard of the word. And now all of a sudden, I'm like a professional. And my father, who was a straight guy, he was a straight arrow, no games. He was all business. He was just a good man, but he was all business. He's looking down right now with my beautiful mother. And they're saying, my son got indicted 4 times. That's more than Alphonse Capone. What the hell's going on? That country's going haywire. No, but they've used this. They've weaponized the DOJ. And these are local prosecutors, but they've weaponized local prosecutors. They've taken people from the DOJ and they've put them into local offices. They've weaponized the whole thing. And if you're a normal but a very good politician and you get a subpoena or you get some form of a grand jury notice, you're sort of out of business. You know what you say? Like hundreds have said before, I will go home now to my family. I will work on my relationship with my family and I will fight for my name. And by the way, that's the last you've ever heard of that person. He's gone. Because they've weaponized. And that's what their form of cheating is now. And if you're a congressman or a senator or anything, at least I have a voice so I can get up and say, here's what the indictment is. And I can explain it. And a poll came out today, 88% say that these indictments are bullshit. So that's a very positive thing. And more importantly, my poll numbers are much higher than they would have been without it. You know, they've gone too far. In fact, I heard they were coming down with another one. They called in for what? Don't do it. We're going to indict this guy into the White House. Don't do it. You ever hear that? No, I don't think my poll numbers, Tom, what do you think? I don't think my poll numbers would be as high. It's not a pleasant thing. You know, I have a judge in New York who's totally conflicted. Totally conflicted. This man is the most conflicted judge that you could ever have in history. And I hate to say a man's crooked, but he's so conflicted, it becomes crooked. And this is what we have. This is what we have. And it's a very sad thing. But when you explain it, I have a big platform like these things and lots of them. And, you know, I can get on television whenever I want. I can explain a lot of work. But my poll numbers are much higher, I think. Wouldn't you say? They're much higher than they would have ever been, Doug. Much higher. So we get something out of it. We get something out of it, but you have to do a lot of work, and it's a very unfair situation, but they weaponize it. That's their current form of cheating. And this never happened in the United States before. This happened with this horrible president who's just he's destroying our country. He's destroying our country. He's a horrible human being, too. And then they go, you know, it's all disinformation. His biggest disinformation, he's a non-athlete, okay? I'm a very good golfer. I'm a very good golfer. I really am. Won 29 club championships. That's a lot, 29 club championships. And he can't play. And he said the other day, it's all disinformation. I'll play Trump anytime. I'll give him 3 aside. He's going to give me 3 aside. Did you ever see him swing? He's like this. The guy, I don't believe he can hit a ball 50 yards. I know sports very well, and I know golf very well, and I know good golfers. I can look at a guy take a practice swing before the round starts. I can tell you whether or not he or she can play. This guy has no, and he said, they asked him what his handicap is. I'm a 6.2. You know, 6.2 is a very good player. He's a 6.2. Got to be that extra little 0.2. You know, like I've never even heard of it. I played only about 40 frickin' years. I've never heard of a 6.2. I've heard of a 6. I've heard of a 7. But I've never heard of a 6.2. But he wants to make it like accurate, you know, like in other words, like it exists. He's all about disinformation. Pilots come in, he said, I used to fly a plane. Truckers come in, I used to drive a truck. People come in from Minnesota. I used to live in Minnesota. Right? He is so full of shit, this guy. Terrible. Terrible. Thank you very much. True. So true. It's so true. Now the fake news back there, they'll say, oh, he used foul language. Every once in a while, you have a good crowd. Every once in a while, you have to use, there's just no other word to describe it, right? Say he didn't use nice words. He didn't use nice. Doesn't work quite the same, does it, huh? But now it's sad what's happening. It's sad what's happening because it's not based on anything. And he was never a smart person. He was always, I knew Ted Kennedy very well. And for some reason, very different persuasion politically, but he lived in Palm Beach largely. They had the Kennedy compound, and I was there for a long time. And I did him a big favor one time, and he liked me. I liked him. I got along with him, but, very different in a lot of ways. But I said, who's the smartest person in the Senate? He said, the smartest person, gave me a name. I won't tell you because he's still around and I can't stand the guy, okay? I said, who's the dumbest person in the U.S. Senate? He said, probably Joe. I said, who the hell is Joe? Joe Biden. He said, he doesn't understand the basic concepts of taxation, of foreign, he doesn't, anytime it gets a little bit complex, he just doesn't understand. And he's our president now. And that was when he was in prime time. He's not prime time anymore. But less than 4 years ago, we had the most secure border in U.S. history. We ended catch and release, built 571 miles of border wall, and got Mexico to send 28,000 soldiers to our border free of charge. I said to the president, we need your soldiers. Why? I said, because you've got caravans. I came up with that name. I'm good with names. I come up with a lot of good names. A lot of them I can't use again because they were against my Republican opponent, and now I get along with them, But we've come up with a lot of good names. Pocahontas was a good name, I think. That actually drove her out of the presidential run, right? Pocahontas, so many good names, but it's a caravan. It's like a caravan. I came up with that. It's thousands of people walking through Mexico. So I said to the president, you got to give us 28,000 soldiers. I want them now. And they got to stop people from pouring over our border, over the border while we're building the wall. We're building the wall. We did far more than I said we were going to do. And I had another 200 miles of wall already built, ready to be put up. Could have been done in 3 weeks. And that's when I realized they didn't want to put it up. And the reason they didn't, because they did want open borders. I couldn't even believe it. It doesn't make sense. An open border doesn't make sense. You can let people in, but you got to know something about the people. They're coming in from all over the world, not just South America. So I said to him, you got to give us 28,000 soldiers. Oh, he laughed at me. Oh, that's so funny. Why would we do that? I said, because you're letting people come through your country and they're pouring into our country. You have to do it. And I really like him too, AMLO. I really like him. He's a good guy, socialist, but that's okay. What the hell? You get along with people. Well, I got along with a lot of them, but I was the toughest president on Russia. I stopped the pipeline. They always say, he was very nice to Russia. No, I was the worst to Russia, but I got along with Putin. We got along. It's nice to get along with somebody that has a nuclear capability, right? It is. I got along with him. But he said, I'd hate like hell to see if you weren't nice, because if you're the nicest, I ended the biggest job they've ever done, the pipeline. When Biden came in, he approved it. And then they say, he was soft on Russia. I was the worst on Russia. By the way, Russia would have never attacked Ukraine if I were president. Never. Not even a possibility. And Israel wouldn't have happened. The October 7th would have never happened. They would have, because Iran was broke under me. I said to China, I said to everybody, every nation, you want to buy from Iran, you want to buy oil, you'll never do business in the United States again. And they didn't want to take a chance, and they didn't. And Iran was broke. They had no money for terror. But we did a hell of a job, and people are realizing it. And I think that's why we're up in just about every poll nationally, swing states, and now even your state. That was a big story, because it came out 2 days ago, and it showed we were 1 point down. Another one came out, we were 1 point up. But when it came out that in Minnesota we're tied or up a little bit or maybe down just a little bit, everyone was so impressed. And I'm saying, like, why wouldn't we be up a lot? I have a friend. He's a very smart guy, but not political. And I had a poll come out last week. I'm up 8 over Biden nationally. But his attitude was, could I ask you a question? How could you only be up 8 points on this guy? That was a question I get a lot. It's almost embarrassing, to be honest with you. Crooked Joe, came in and turned our country into a dumping ground for other nations. They dump everything right into our country. In Venezuela, violent crime was 67% 2 months ago. It's now 72%. It's down. Violent crime in Venezuela is down 72% because they're taking their gangs and inmates and criminals and drug dealers and mental patients and people from all sorts of institutions that are trouble, and they deposit them in the wonderful USA. They're dumping everybody into the USA. Pretty soon we're going to say, let's go for a vacation to Venezuela because it's safer than the United States. And I'm serious. It is so terrible what they're doing. They're dumping from all over the world. The Congo, they come from the Congo, from prisons in the Congo, in Africa. But they're coming from Africa, they're coming from Asia, they're coming from all over the world, they're coming from the Middle East, and they're coming from really bad places. And they're putting them in our beautiful country. They're destroying our country. This idiot, this stupid, stupid man is destroying our country. He doesn't know what the hell he's doing. He doesn't know what he's doing. Just days ago, an illegal alien was arrested in the sanctuary state of California. Isn't that wonderful, sanctuary? Sounds so nice, isn't it? Sanctuary. And charged with sadistically raping 2 women last week in the back of a windowless van that police said was disgustingly outfitted as a, quote, a rape dungeon on wheels. That's what it was. They went around raping women all over the place. Nobody did anything about it. Detectives believe this monster had many more victims whom he drove late at night into remote mountain areas and in many cases would kill them. When I return to the White House, we will stop the plunder, rape, slaughter, and destruction of our American suburbs, cities, and towns. We're going to stop it fast. We will shut down immediately all deadly sanctuary cities. We're going to close them down. And you know, the people in sanctuary states, they don't want them. They really don't want them. It's not so bad. If you would have said that 5 years ago, 7 years ago, but the people, they don't want them. They don't want that. They don't want sanctuary cities. It's the politicians that do. Somehow it's good politically. I don't actually think it is, but we're going to shut them down. I'll shift massive portions of federal law enforcement to immigration enforcement. I came in and saved a couple of your cities. Remember that? You remember that, right? Remember I came in with a big force that we saved. And Minneapolis, we really saved. Remember that idiot from CNN? Oops, I shouldn't say that. I'm doing a debate for them. They'll be slightly tougher. No, I have fake Tapper is the, they said, I just want to debate this guy, but you know, and I'm going to demand a drug test too, by the way. I am. No, I really am. I don't want him coming in like the State of the Union. He was high as a kite. I said, is that Joe up there? A beautiful robe? And by the end of the evening, he's like, well, it was exhausted, right? Now, we're going to demand a drug test, but fake Tapper and these people, they're going to be fine. They're going to be fair. I think they're going to be fair. And if they're not, you know, you have to deal with it, right? You have to deal with it. But I just wanted to accept, and, you know, the only one he wanted to do it on basically CNN and another one agreed to, 2 of them, I guess. And they just agreed or something to a vice president debate. I said, how can I have a vice president debate? I haven't even picked the gentleman or woman yet. I haven't picked. A lot of people think it's that guy right there. I don't know who the hell it is. He'd be very good. We have a lot of them would be good, Doug, right? We have a lot of good people. But as you may know, in addition to the millions of people pouring across our border, Joe Biden is now reportedly planning to bring in massive numbers of Gazans from the Middle East and resettle them in American communities. I can't believe you don't, with Tlaib and AOC +3 and all of these things, you don't like that. I'm surprised in Minnesota. I thought you were a very liberal place. I thought you were very liberal. I'm so surprised, so disappointed. You've had enough, right? You've had enough. They're saying in Minnesota, I've done my share. Let's end this stuff. Let's end it. Now it's pretty amazing, actually. How about where they were flying them? Did you see it got caught 2 months ago? Everyone's, you know, they're pouring through. But then we found out that they're flying them over the border, freely flying thousands and thousands of people over the borders into little towns and states, great states, that they didn't do anything to deserve this, and they're being swamped now. I just don't understand the thinking, you know? We're really, you know, some people say you're conservative. I say, yeah, I'm conservative, I guess, but I'm really more of a common sense person. I think we're the party of common sense. I'd almost rather, and that means you need borders, you need a strong military, you need good education, try and get low interest rates, low taxes. But basically, it's sort of mostly common sense. Like we just went over men and women's sports. We don't want to have men in women's sports. It's actually very dangerous. You know, women are being very badly hurt. Now they want to do boxing. They want to have women in boxing. You can't do these things, okay? You can't do these things. And professional boxers know it very well because they play around. They say, you can't have women in boxing, but they actually want to have women in boxing. The whole thing is crazy. And I think, you know, we're really the party of common sense. I'm making a speech in a week to the let's see, what would I call it? A couple of parties that generally don't vote for us, but they would be with us. They vote for that party. And I'm making a speech. It's a little bit of a secret right now, but I'm making a speech to a certain group of people that get 3 or 4%. You know who I'm talking about, right? The libertarians, they're great people, and they are based largely on common sense. And I say, you know, they get 3 or 4%. The libertarians get 3 or 4% every year, no matter who runs. And every one of those votes is a Republican vote. Wouldn't you say? I mean, I think every one of those votes, Mr. Chairman, is a Republican vote. And I'm going to say, why aren't we doing this together? Why are we doing this? You know, you're going to get your 3%. You're going to feel wonderful, but you're not going to get anything. There's no value in that. But you add that 3% to us, and we can't lose. We'll win by record numbers. And that's basically my speech. It's very simple. That's basically my speech. But they'll be coming from one of the biggest terrorist havens on the planet, the place where the October 7th attack was planned. I mean, they're coming in from places like that, and they're coming into our country. And they launched the attack right from the areas where they're coming into our country. It's not, we can't let this happen. We have to stop it. We're not going to have a country. We're poisoning our country. These people will be impossible to vet. The vast majority support Hamas, and even neighboring countries like Egypt and Jordan don't want them. You know, Jordan doesn't want them. Egypt doesn't want them. They don't want them. But crooked Joe Biden says, we'll take them here. It's nothing but trouble. You know, you've heard the snake quite a bit, right? Everybody heard the snake. I should have brought it. I should have done the snake. But basically, you take snakes, and you're going to get bit. And we're taking people that are people that other people don't want, and I guess for a reason. You know, neighbors don't want to take them, any of them. And it's a sad thing. It's a very sad thing, but we have to be very, very vigilant. Look, we have a country that's very fragile. We have a country that could very quickly end up in World War III because we have stupid people running our country. We were guaranteed no wars. All of these things wouldn't have happened. Think of it. Ukraine wouldn't have happened. Inflation wouldn't have happened. Israel attack wouldn't have happened. None of it would have happened. President Xi wouldn't be flying planes all over the place over Taiwan. He wasn't going to do that. He would have never done that with me as president. And everybody admits it. Even the Democrats admit it. But it's no wonder Joe Biden and his thugs are so desperate to stop us. And they know that we are the only ones who can stop them. You know, this MAGA movement, make America great again, Joe. You know, the way he says, we're going to stop the MAGA movement. He doesn't have any idea what MAGA means. No, he has no idea what MAGA means. We will stop the MAGA movement. Pause. Oh, pause. Remember that one? This is what we're dealing with. And you know, in the debate, you notice we'll have debates. I think, you know, we're going to have this debate, sort of. If he makes it through the debate, and I think he will, they'll say it was the finest debate performance in history. There was no way that Trump could have competed with the intellect. This is the greatest ever. I watched after that horrible State of the Union speech on CNN and MSDNC, where they go, that's MS, Democratic National Committee, for those of you that aren't very, MSDNC. It is MSDNC. Terrible people. Terrible, terrible, sick people. But I watched where they were saying how great this was. This was the greatest performance since FDR. You know, FDR had the golden tone. and he would sit up and he'd give a State of the Union speech. FDR, beautiful voice, beautiful, very highly educated guy, and beautiful tone. We will fight, and nobody will beat us. We will fight and fight and fight. And, you know, he'd do it so beautifully. And then Joe Biden, do you ever notice he's always like, how the hell did this ever happen to our country? Now, he's always coughing, but it's not like a cough. He puts his hand up. Then he walks out and he starts shaking people's hands. I don't want to shake. Do you ever notice how many people don't want to shake his hand? The people don't want to shake his hand. It's disgusting. The radical left Democrats rigged the presidential election in 2020, and we are not going to allow them to rig the presidential election in 2024. Counting on you. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, you have a lot of spirit in this room, you know. You're sitting on a wild pony. Chairman, you're sitting on a wild pony. You got to pull that pony. You got to get it going. Everybody has to get out and vote. That's the big thing. They told me to say that, sir, could you please say, because we have a lot of people, you know, some people, they love us, but they don't tend to vote. I don't know, for whatever reason, but they love us more than they've ever loved anybody, but they don't vote. We got to get them out to vote. We do that. Then they can cheat a little bit at least, you know, because they will cheat a little bit. You know, you can't stop them. I saw a news announcer the other night on television. They were talking about a certain state. And they said, well, you have to win it by at least 5 or 6 points more because they cheat. And they're talking about this on like a program. I say, isn't that terrible when they're allowed to say that, where they're allowed to say that you have to win by 6 points because they cheat? So we can't do that, but we're going to get everybody out to vote. There's more spirit now than there was in 2016 or 2020. And we got a lot of votes by a lot. Because they've had 4 years of watching. You know, when I did 2016, the border was a big issue. I almost got elected on the border, and the border was bad, but it was nothing compared to this. It was like a peanut. It was like 5% compared to this. I fixed the border, and the border in 2020 was not an issue. Just wasn't an issue. I used to tell my people backstage, these genius people, I say, I want to talk about the border. Sir, they don't want to hear about the border. You fixed it. I said, isn't that lousy? You do a good job. You can't talk about it anymore. But we still got millions of votes more, but I couldn't talk because we fixed it. But this border is many times worse. This isn't just a little bit. This is many, many times worse than it was. It was peanuts compared to what it is now. This is the worst border in the history of the world. There's never been a country in history that had a border like this that's leaking. And we have at least 15 or 16 million people. That's bigger than almost every state. We have at least 15 or 16 million people. It could be much higher than that, have poured into our country, and we have no idea who they are. And bad things are going to happen, and we have to get them out of here fast because bad things are going to happen. Every time the radical left Democrats, Marxists, communists, and fascists indict me, I consider it a great badge of honor. I really do, actually. You're lucky to have me instead of some stiff that would crawl into a corner. They'd crawl into a corner. Mommy, I don't like this job. Mommy, take me home, they'd say. It's so much fun. Darling, I have a little bad news for you. Go home to our great First Lady, who says hello, by the way. They love our First Lady. I had my very tall son today, he graduated from high school. All 6'9". 6'9". He was easy to spot. You look over that, and you have this one kid like 6'9", but he got good marks. He's a good boy. It was a big day, actually. You know, for a while, the judge said you can't go to your son's graduation, but it was a lot of people not happy about that. But it was a beautiful thing to watch. But if you think about what we're doing and what I'm doing, I'm being indicted for you. And never forget, our enemies want to take away my freedom because I will never let them take away your freedom. true. Thank you. Thank you. They want to silence me because I will never let them silence you. And in the end, they're not really after me. They're after you. And I'm just standing in their way, and I always will. I'll be standing right in their way. They're not doing anything to you. From the very first day that we take back the White House from crooked Joe Biden, I believe we're going to see some of the greatest years ahead ever, with so much potential in our country that's untapped. They've just turned off everything. They've turned on a lot of things, and they're all bad. Everything they did was just bad. In my first 4 years, we ended the disaster known as NAFTA, the worst trade deal ever made in the history of our country, and replaced it. Everyone said, you'll never be able to end it. We got it ended by Congress, right, Pete? And replaced it with the brand new USMCA, the best trade deal ever made. It's a fantastic, giant win for Minnesota farmers and dairy producers and manufacturers and everyone else. And I know it's good because Mexico and Canada are dying to change it. They're trying to get to change. And this guy will probably give them a change. Don't do it, Joe. Don't do it. I took on communist China like no administration in history, bringing hundreds of billions of dollars pouring into our treasury when no other president had gotten even 10 cents from, not 10 cents from China. And I think I made people aware that China is a threat, certainly an economic threat. And we took in hundreds of billions of dollars from China. I then gave $28 billion, as I said, to the farmer. And in my next term, I will pass the Trump Reciprocal Trade Act. You know what that is? If China or any other country makes us pay a single dime, if they make us pay, let's say 100 or 200% tariff, which they do, we will make them pay a reciprocal tariff of 100 or 200% right back. In other words, you screw us and we screw you. And you know, a lot of politicians, a lot of senators, one of them is not that much into the economic world. And I said, I want your support. We were all set to do that until COVID came in. Then we had to focus on the COVID stuff, which was a terrible, gift from China. But, and we did a great job on it with the therapeutics and everything else. But think, and when we left, the stock market was higher than it was pre-COVID. I mean, it was sort of an amazing thing. We did a good job on it. We never got credit. I got credit for the military. I got credit for knocking out ISIS. Soleimani, al-Baghdadi. I got a lot of credit, Space Force, but we never got credit for the job we did, with this unknown dust that happened to fly in from China, the pandemic, as they call it, COVID, as I call it, the China virus. We want to be accurate. A gift from China. But unlike Joe Biden, who will destroy Medicare and Social Security with his border invasion, when you let millions of people come into our country, you're destroying Medicare, you're destroying your hospitals, you're destroying Social Security. I'll always protect Medicare and Social Security for our great seniors. They deserve it. They deserve it. They have to be protected. We'll never change it. And I didn't change it. We've also gotten abortion out of the federal government and back to the states, which is a very big thing. Something we have to talk about, because a lot of Republican politicians really don't know how to talk about it. If you remember when you look at Roe v. Wade, the big thing was getting it out of the federal government. Every legal scholar, every legal analyst, everybody wanted it back. Democrats wanted it. Everybody wanted it back. And we got it back. We took it back and we put it into the hands of the states. And now it's up to the people. The people are voting all over the country. They just voted in Ohio, and frankly, it was a more liberal vote than a lot of people thought. But what it is it's the vote of the people. They just voted in Kansas. It was a far more, I won both those states by a lot, but it was a far more liberal vote. And in some cases, you have a little bit of the opposite. But we took it out of the federal government where it never belonged. And this used to be only a question of, will it be in the federal government? Is it in the federal government? Nobody wanted it in the federal. They wanted it back in the states. And now the states are deciding. And I think we've made an issue that was a very nasty issue, a very complex issue, very bad issue, frankly. I think we've made it much simpler. And I think we've made it much more fair if the radical Democrat extremists get their way, they will have a federal law for abortion in the 7th, 8th, 9th month, and even executing a baby after birth. If you remember the governor, the former governor, Democrat of Virginia, he said, we'll talk to the mother, we'll talk to the father. If the baby's born, we'll put the baby aside. And then essentially said, we'll execute the baby after birth. We'll make a decision on what to do with the baby. We don't want that. They're the radical ones. We're not the radical ones. They're the radical ones, and you have to remember it. And you also have to remember that every voter has to go with your heart. You have to go with your heart and your beliefs and do what's right. But you have to think about one thing. We have to get elected. You have to get elected. And if you can't get elected, then not only the abortion issue, but you have many, many other issues that are very powerful, very big issues, like issues that run our country. We have to get elected. So I want to thank the 6 Supreme Court justices, Clarence Thomas, Samuel Alito, John Roberts, Brett Kavanaugh, Neil Gorsuch, and Amy Coney Barrett for the wisdom and the courage that they showed on this long-term, very contentious issue. And getting it back to the states puts the question where it belongs with a vote of the people. It puts it really where it belongs, the vote of the people. And it's really, it's been sort of amazing because it's really calmed down a lot. I think you see that, Tom. It's calmed down a lot. It's now a vote of the people, and our country can finally come together. This issue has been going along for 51 years, and it's been very, very nasty. It's been a rough issue. And until maybe 10 years ago, all they talked about was they wanted to get it back to the states. We brought it back to the states, and now the states are deciding, and people are coming together. So it's very interesting to watch, actually, but I want to thank the justices. Before I even arrive at the Oval Office, shortly after we win the presidency, we win. It's all of us. We're going to win it together. I will have the horrible war between Russia and Ukraine settled. I know both of them very well. And we will build a great iron dome over our country, a dome like has never been seen before. A state-of-the-art missile defense shield that will be entirely built in America and create jobs. And much of it will be built actually in a place called Minnesota. A lot of it's going to be built right here. One of the nations that are big. But don't you think, I watch Israel and I watch those rockets go up, 300 rockets go up, and virtually every one of them is knocked down. Well, we're a big target. And the level of power, the level of power of these weapons, especially the nuclear weapons, the power is so incredible. We deserve to have a dome like other countries have domes, like Israel has a dome. Think of Israel without the dome, without the Iron Dome or whatever you want to call it, but that's what it is. And it was largely manufactured and it was largely conceived by us. We can do something that was so incredible. It really will be a safety net, and I think we deserve to have it. And again, it's made in the USA. It really works. I mean, they shut down I think every missile, maybe one got through, but they shut down close to 300 missiles. Now think of what would happen if they didn't have it. 300 missiles, you might not even have in Israel right now. We need that same kind of protection for ourselves. We have to have it, and we'll do it, and we'll do it at the highest level. It'll be an amazing thing. We're going to give our police back their protection, and we're going to give them back their respect. As president, when the rioters came to burn down Minneapolis, I insisted on sending in the National Guard to save the city. I saved your city. Remember, though? Velchi. Remember Velchi? This is a peaceful protest. This is largely peaceful. The entire city was burning down behind me. You remember the scene? The fire looked like it went for miles. He's saying, this is a peaceful protest. And then somebody threw something, hit him on the leg, and he went down, right? He went down. He's down. He's down. It's a peaceful. It was real peaceful. You lost half your damn city. If you didn't have me as president, you wouldn't have Minneapolis today, and you wouldn't have had a couple of other cities that we saved, or little beautiful areas that we saved. We saved them for you. But I'll never forget the scene of this guy screaming that this is peaceful. It's peaceful. And people are throwing everything at him, including bullets. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Where are they coming from? Under my leadership, we will stand up to the radical Marxist DAs who have set loose thousands of dangerous, horrible, dangerous criminals onto our streets. We're going to rebuild our cities into beacons of hope, safety, and beauty better than they've ever been before. We will take over the horribly run capital of our nation in Washington, D.C., and clean up, renovate, and rebuild our capital so that it's no longer a nightmare of murder and crime, but rather it will become the most beautiful capital anywhere in the world, and it will be safe for people of Minnesota to go and see those wonderful monuments to monumental people. It will be safe. It's a cesspool of crime and graffiti right now. You have to see our capital, what happened to our capital. They're going to clean it up, make it more beautiful than it ever was, be the most beautiful capital in the world. On day one, I will sign a new executive order to cut federal funding for any school pushing critical race theory, transgender insanity, and any other inappropriate racial, sexual, or political content onto the lives of our children. Yeah.